I feel real bad I didn't enjoy this movie more, because I know so many of you are looking forward to it, and so was I. I was like decidedly team In the Heights when it comes to In the Heights versus West Side Story. I was like, West Side Story, you should just go home. But we'll talk about West Side Story. After seeing In the Heights, my feeling on that has changed. Because instead of the home run that I was expecting based on the incredible trailers, I think the misleading trailers, in my opinion, this ends up being a serviceable film adaptation of the musical that got Lin Manuel Miranda on the road to Hamilton. So, all right, so are you going to like this? Well, at this point, you know if you're a fan of Lin Manuel Miranda's work or not. So you have to think if you would enjoy 2.5 hours of Lin Manuel Miranda's work. That's basically what it is. I think he's become extremely one note, and you either like that note or you don't. To be honest, it's very similar to the Hamilton experience in terms of length, and that it's almost 100% singing and has very little dialogue. But I don't think it's as strong as Hamilton. I came to really like Hamilton, particularly in the second act. And here are some of the reasons why I don't think this is as strong. First off, it doesn't have as strong a cast. When I saw Daveed Diggs in Hamilton, I was like, he is a star. Fantastic. And also Jonathan Groff. I thought those two guys did a lot of the heavy lifting in Hamilton. And when they showed up, sprinkled throughout the show, they really raised it above and beyond. They were incredible. Here, the cast is certainly likable, but nobody leaps off the screen. And that's partially because of who's cast, but also because In the Heights doesn't have a clear lead. So it doesn't really give anybody the space to create a potential. I don't know. I think Daveed Diggs and Jonathan Groff their roles aren't huge in Hamilton. But basically, imagine, take My Fair Lady, right? But instead of focusing on Eliza Doolittle, Henry Higgins, and a little bit on Eliza's father, imagine if the story was spread out amongst all the characters, even ones that seemed like they were very small roles. If you just spread it out amongst everybody, then you kind of have a situation where it's just all too diluted. And speaking of My Fair Lady and movie musicals in general, In the Heights doesn't deliver that lavish musical experience. It's a little bit of the same problem that Mulan ran into, where, people want what they want. And, Disney, when they did Mulan, they were like, oh, we're going to strip out all the, the classical musical stuff about it to make it more authentic. And people really missed that element. So I'm curious to see how some people will love In the Heights, obviously, but I'm curious to see how people who aren't hardcore theater people will react to it. Because, again, it doesn't have that movie musical treatment. Because I'm sorry to say the trailers are misleading. I thought the trailers were incredible, but you've basically seen every dance number and most of it already. In the Heights is not jam-packed with big, lavish musical numbers. And while Jon Chu has some inventive choices here and there in terms of visuals, particularly a third act, number where they're dancing on the side of a building, but you've already seen all the cool shots in that sequence, that's just a mere drop in a 2.5 hour, runtime. There's so little in comparison to the runtime. I think Chu has done a lot for representation in Hollywood by making this and Crazy Rich Asians, and I think that's really commendable. But I honestly feel he hasn't added to the films themselves at all. We know his past work. We know he's not a great director. So basically, how he's ended up succeeding all of a sudden is that he just gets out of the way of these projects. He just steps aside and lets them, just be them. But that's not good enough, because he doesn't offer any creative guidance to make them really pop on screen as a good director is supposed to do. With both Crazy Rich Asians and In the Heights, I never felt watching either movie like I was in the hands of a really good director. There's no direction. There's no highlighting what's being said or what's being sung. You're not directing the audience's point of view. You're not making something very clear. Again, I think the casting was a little off, although Lin Manuel Miranda helped with that. So I thought that was a little disappointing. Now take Steven Spielberg's upcoming West Side Story, whose own trailer debuted during the Grammys, and where the blockbuster filmmaker already displayed some very cool creative choices. Now sure, that trailer could also be misleading. Come on, Hollywood, stop. You should know if your movie can deliver on the trailer that you've cut. But anyway, it will be very hard also, in addition to maybe the trailer being misleading, I don't know if Spielberg's West Side Story can overcome basically casting Armie Hammer Jr. as one of its leads. But West Side Story, just the material itself, is more of a traditional movie musical, from the music to the production numbers. And while again before I thought In the Heights would bury the new West Side Story, I thought the new West Side Story should just go home, I now suspect audiences will either be split or will gravitate towards both, enjoying West Side Story for its timeless classic elements that are, proven crowd pleasers, and then I think also appreciating again the authenticity and the newness, the different qualities of In the Heights. I'd be curious to know what you value more. I mean, again, you can value both, but In the Heights does not deliver what people I think have come to expect from a movie musical. Out of the cast, I actually thought Gregory Diaz IV stood out the most. He's very funny. He really delivers some killer jokes. And I thought he really broke through in the large ensemble. And it was fun to go, oh, look, it's Jimmy Smits. Or is that Mark Antony? And oh my goodness, Stephanie Beatriz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I'm so happy Dea from Orange is the New Black got more work. But I have to tell you, all those actors have very small roles. Jimmy Smits has like a sizable role, but the other people, you would think you would use them more. Anthony Ramos is fine in the lead role, but, it's interesting. They're both from Hamilton, but Lin Manuel Miranda, who I actually said in my review of Hamilton was one of the weakest, if not the weakest performer there, he originated this role, In the Heights, and he felt that he aged out of it, which is why Ramos is playing the character here now. But Ramos' performance, I'm sorry to say, made me say, you know what, let's put Lin Manuel Miranda back in here. Because Lin Manuel Miranda has a real heart on his sleeve quality that I think probably would have worked really well here. I just didn't think Ramos popped enough. And I thought from the little I saw of Lin Manuel Miranda here, because he is playing a different character, I was like, yeah. I have to say, I think Lin Manuel Miranda, with his heart on his sleeve and his big eyes, I think that he really lends himself to film, which is why I feel bad that Hamilton was just a recording of the Broadway show and not a proper film adaptation. I think Lin Manuel Miranda connects very well on camera, and I think he did here even briefly, and so I think I would have maybe liked to have seen him in the lead anyway. He does show up very briefly, and his character here, his feud with the local Mr. Softee guy, I thought was very funny. Who, by the way, the Mr. Softee guy is played by Hamilton's George Washington, and they have a little end credit scene that you should stick around for that I thought was cute. Christopher Jackson, that's the actor, by the way, he really pops, even though I think his character had maybe one line or no lines. I mean, the Hamilton cast was just really strong. I mean, there's like, who's that Mr. Softee guy? Hey, look, it's George Washington. I thought that was great. At the very end, there's a brief nod in the lyrics to It's a Wonderful Life. And that really, I was like, oh, is that what you're trying to do here? Like, it kind of gave me a little bit more of an understanding of Lin Manuel Miranda's goal with what he's trying to say with In the Heights. But I just wish that this musical was as focused as that classic movie. And again, didn't try to have so many lead characters. I think it's just too many leads. Still, even though I didn't love In the Heights, Lin Manuel Miranda is impressively opening a lot of doors in Hollywood. For instance, Ramos will star in the next Transformers movie. That's a huge deal. And Lin Manuel Miranda does bring a very unique and interesting perspective to Hollywood. So In the Heights, I think, is definitely worth watching. It's just, again, Lin Manuel Miranda is so one note, and I do worry a little bit about his upcoming work. I think that Moana ended up having tremendous legs and is very popular on Disney Plus. So I'm a big believer in letting the audience, letting the results speak for themselves. So let's see how In the Heights does, and let's see how his other projects do. So far, Mary Poppins, not successful. So I guess he's, 1 for 2. Now, as to whether or not you should watch In the Heights in movie theaters or on HBO Max, I watched a screener. Warner Brothers really wanted us to go to the theater, but if I have the screening option, I take it. I would advise that you listen to a few tracks from the musical from Broadway. See if it's for you. If you're like, oh man, this is really my jam, then go see it in theaters and have a great time. Otherwise, I'd give it a whirl on HBO Max. Again, I wouldn't miss it, but I don't know if it's theater worthy. And I don't think it's as strong an awards contender as Warner Brothers is pushing it as. And I have to see West Side Story still. But again, it's a serviceable adaptation of the musical. I don't think it elevates it or takes it to the next level as you would expect a good film adaptation to do. So that's my review of In the Heights. Share your own thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.